What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Rutgers Rundown podcast. I'm your host, Nick Hart, alongside my co-host, Matt Mangam. And Matt, we had a busy weekend in Rutgers sports, as we always do. Rutgers basketball coming off of a tough loss out in Oregon. We got some lacrosse to talk about, and the start of baseball and softball, and also a little bit of a preview going into tonight's women's basketball game versus Northwestern. But Matty M, without further ado, let's get right into it. Rutgers men's basketball, 75-57 loss, and it's not even the loss that I think hurt. Obviously it did. Rutgers now 2 games under 500 for the first time since 2019, but it's more so just the effort. The effort was not there for Rutgers basketball last night. It was bad.
Yeah, I'd say the first half was a little bit more close, but in the second half, Rutgers was outscored 37-24, and yeah, you're completely right, Nick. I don't want to be the person that says like they gave up, but it really just felt like if you look at this team the way they were playing 2 months ago until now, it just looks very different. That same passion, energy isn't there. Maybe it was the West Coast, the time zone difference, but I'm not here to point fingers or make excuses. It was just a tough performance, and that second half did not look like the Rutgers we know and love.
Well, the thing is, listen, if you're getting outplayed, it's one thing, but when you're just out there and you make a good point, it almost looks like they kind of just gave up in that game. And it didn't help. You didn't get a lot of production from your 2 big guys. Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey only combined for 21 points. Just wasn't their night whatsoever. 4 of 13 for Ace from the field, 5 of 14 for Dylan from the field, and a combined 2 of 12 from beyond the arc. Just not a great game, but you kind of expect that every once in a while. Obviously, you don't want to see it because it's your 2 best players, but it wasn't their night. And you go over to the Oregon side, and they shot really well throughout the game. 6 of 10 from beyond the arc in the first half, 7 of 12 from beyond the arc in the second. Not to say that Rutgers got unlucky because they were outplayed, and that's kind of been the theme of the season, but Oregon had a very, very nice performance.
Yeah, Rutgers, shot 46% from the floor overall. Again, I just think it's one of those games where the 3-point shooting really made the difference. Oregon, like you said, shooting overall 59% from 3, and then Rutgers 21%. And something that I've noticed is just, the 3-point shooting has obviously been a struggle for Rutgers. Harper this game took 8 3-point attempts. He only made 2 of them. And over the last 2 games, Harper and Bailey have combined to go 3 of 18 from 3-point range, which is just really, really poor. And they've combined for as well just 12 rebounds. But yeah, so the 2 have been a little bit of a slump recently. I'd say Bailey has been more of a slump than Harper. Harper had a good game against Maryland, had a decent game against Iowa, but it's really been more Bailey. But still, the 3-point shooting really made a difference in this game. And again, Rutgers just can't defend the perimeter properly, or the paint either, for that matter, actually.
Well, and I think not having a bona fide, big man has really hurt them all season. Lathan Somerville, we talked about him a little bit last week. He's not a true big whatsoever. And I feel like Rutgers has always had kind of either good perimeter defense or good interior presence. They didn't have that this year. They don't have a great, they don't have a great perimeter defense, and they don't have anybody protecting the rim. So that's why you're kind of seeing this team go, more towards an offensive-centric team than a defensive-centric team. But then, again, you see them put up 57 points in a conference game, and then you're like, is this really an offensive-centric team if they're only going to put up 57 points in a game? Listen, it's one thing if that's going to be your style as a team, if you're going to be a run-and-gun team, but, to not put up 60 points and drop now, what is that, your 8th Big Ten game? No, 10th Big Ten game. What am I saying? The formula hasn't worked, and now if you're Rutgers, you're back in a situation where there's a really good chance you fall out of the Big Ten tournament, and that would be probably one of the bigger disappointments in recent history for Rutgers.
Yeah, we've been talking about it this whole season, not the whole season, but for most season it's just been a downward spiral. But this last week with the Maryland loss, the Iowa loss, and the Oregon loss, Rutgers, I felt like after the wins against Northwestern and Illinois, they were in a pretty good spot. Just win 1 or 2 more games, and you get that Big Ten tournament seed basically confirmed. You beat Iowa, you beat Oregon, you get that seed confirmed. They lost both those games, and now looking at Washington on Wednesday night,
It doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the standings, it's literally Rutgers is 15th, 5-10 overall in the conference, and Washington's 16th in the conference, 4-10 overall. So Rutgers needs to win this game. This is a must-win game to give yourself that extra gap over Washington for the Big Ten tournament seeding because, Rutgers after this has USC, Michigan, Purdue. Oh, after that game has USC at home, Michigan on the road, Purdue on the road, Minnesota at home. You'd think they could beat USC and Minnesota at home. Those are technically two quad 3 opponents, but they played back against Iowa. So they really need to beat Washington. If they don't beat Washington, Nick, and Washington wins, they're probably not making the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, and the focus then goes on to next season and where do you go from here? And I think that's unfortunately a question that a lot of fans are asking themselves, and that's a question that Steve Peichel's asking himself because this was a huge letdown, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but the team has not shown signs of improvement. I mean, it seems like Rutgers has not had consistency all year. They haven't been healthy all year, but even outside of that, it's just this team was not put together well. I think we're seeing more and more that Jordan Durkak just he can't play at this level. I hate to say it, but the skill's not translating. It's simply not. I mean, he's been bad. He played 8 minutes in that game. 8 minutes in the last game, collected, 0 for 1 from the field with 2 rebounds, 2 turnovers, a block, and a steal.
Yeah.
You can't have that from a guy who is supposed to be in your starting 5. I mean, it's like Rutgers just didn't know where to go in the offseason. They kind of pulled pieces together that again looked great on paper, but it just didn't pan out, excuse me. And you could have almost seen this coming if it wasn't for the fact that Dylan and Ace were the top 2 prospects that they were. You look at the rest of this team and you go, this is terrible. But since you have Dylan and Ace, it's like, okay, this is manageable. But you're putting a lot of pressure on 2 18, maybe 19-year-olds, and I think, fans are starting to see, hey, this was not the team to put around these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you put all your faith in those 2 guys. I mean, of course they're the top 2 and 3 picks in the NBA or draft, or whatever, up and coming top 3 freshmen. Excuse me. They're obviously gonna be great players for your team, but they're gonna have off nights. That's gonna happen. We've seen this. And when they have off nights, this last game against Iowa, yesterday against Oregon, just nobody stepped up. And that's the thing, is that there's still not a third guy for the scoring. We haven't seen one there. We thought maybe Tyson Acuff, but he just doesn't get enough minutes at times. He'll have a good performance, he'll just ride the bench next game.
He played 5 minutes last game.
Yeah.
And that's one that I don't get, because he has played really well at times throughout the season, and I feel like he could be that guy out there on the court, but it seems like there's no faith in him. And outside of the starting 5, there really wasn't much of a rotation of guys. I mean, Latham played 30 minutes. Dylan played 31 minutes. Ace played 29 minutes. Dylan Grant played 27. And Jeremiah Williams played 27. Outside of that, there's 2 players who played, double-digit minutes, and that was Jermichael Davis and Zach Martini, both playing 15.
And they only had to come out for just 7 points.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot rely on these guys. I mean, it almost reminds me of the New York Knicks and Tibbs over there. He's just running his same guys out there, hoping that they can last till the end, and sometimes that's not the case, especially when you play such a tough Big Ten schedule against multiple ranked opponents. That's not going to be the case. And then all of a sudden, when one of those guys goes down or is sick or whatever, ailment happened this season, then what happens? Then you have a group of guys who has not played significant minutes, who are going out and being asked to play starting minutes and be a primary scorer when, A, that wasn't your plan for them, and B, they haven't done that all season. And it's not to say that it's not fair to the players, because you got to be ready for anything, but I mean, put yourself in their shoes. If you're a guy that's been on the bench the whole game, and then, or even the whole season, then all of a sudden, Dylan Harper's out for a game and you have to step up, you're not going to be ready for that. You're not going to be conditioned for that. You're not going to, it's different to do it in practice than it is to do it in games. And I think we're seeing that more and more as the season winds to an end.
Yeah, I mean, they really are just running out of time, and yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just the bench guys. The bench only combined for just 9 points. Does that really speaks for itself? Not Jeremiah. Michael Davis with 4, Martini with 3, and Bryce Torch with 2. So
First collegiate points for him as well. So
yeah,
shout out.
Yeah, shout out. I think Dylan Grant also could be the third scorer, but the problem is he's just still a little bit raw to this league. I mean, he was thrusted into the lineup in like January, kind of like late mid January. Obviously he wasn't really the guy at first, but he emerged out of nowhere, and he's still developing, but he's looked good at times. Like against Maryland, we saw that with his career high day, points wise. But yeah, it really makes me think about what's the future of this program, because you say bye to Harper and Bailey. Martini graduates. I'm blanking who else. Acuff graduates.
Jay Will's gone.
He's a redshirt senior.
So
he should have. She should have one more year, I think.
Well, but even so, if that's like your one lone holdover, I mean,
yeah,
it's not going to be great.
So I'm saying, yeah, and then they'll bring back Dorsch, they'll bring back Grant, they'll bring back Lathan. We'll see if those guys had to leave. They bring back Durkak. We'll see what the roster looks like by next season. But it doesn't really look promising, and they're gonna really need to hit the portal again, because it's gonna be really important. But yeah, I feel like there's just not really much else to say. This season was a complete disappointment, and no matter what they do, once they go on and win the Big Ten tournament and make a run in March Madness, nothing can make up for the fact how much Peichel failed with what he had this season.
So with that said, this is a question I want to ask you, Matt, again. What is the temperature of Peichel's seat right now? As somebody that covers the team, as a fan, what is your opinion on the Peichel hot seat?
Well, I wouldn't say it's like 100 degrees, because it all goes back to the fact that Rutgers doesn't have an AD right now. So who's going to fire him? If they did have like a real AD in place and everything, and this was like, how do I say this? Like the program, not the program, the university wasn't in disarray right now without the AD scandal with Pat Hobbs. If Pat Hobbs was here and there was something going on with him, I would say the C is probably like 80 degrees. Because I think, but I also think they wouldn't fire him because of that. I don't see the program or the university firing Peichel. I think if he's going to leave, it's going to be on his own terms. Because, I don't know. But if you ask me, I think it's like 80 degrees. Like, if you were asking what I think it should be.
Well,
what do you think? What do you think?
I personally think it's time for a change. I think this season opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that Peichel might not be the best coach. Listen, he's had some decent teams in the past. He's gotten a lot done with a lot less. But it's really hard to mess up having two of the best players you'll probably ever have in your program.
Yep.
And having arguably one of the worst seasons in your tenure as a coach, I don't see a world in which fans are happy with that. But I agree. I think without an AD, it's very tough for Rutgers to make that decision. But I think if it were a normal situation, I think there's a lot of deliberation about if Peichel comes back next season.
And if they don't make the Big Ten tournament, I will say the seat gets to practically on fire. Like a volcano, just like lava is on the seat at that point. If they don't make the Big Ten tournament, because he can if they make the tournament and he gets a win or two, he'll it's like throwing an ice pack on the seat. But if they don't make the Big Ten tournament after this, just completely that's it. And they just just basically pour a bucket of lava on that seat.
All right. Well, that is from our certified ball knower himself, Matt Mangam. Self-proclaimed ball knower, we should add. But
never said that.
We'll move on over now. We got the spring sports going on. Baseball took a road trip down to Kennesaw State, taking 2 games of 3 after dropping the first against Kennesaw State. And Matt, we talked about this, kind of off the podcast. Just this Rutgers team is going to look a lot different. They brought in 27 different players this year, whether that was transfers or incoming players, like freshmen, but only 11 holdovers from last season. So a much different look, obviously without one of your best players in Joshua Kuroda-Grauer, who was drafted by the Athletics, and you lost a lot of your pitching staff, but Rutgers with a nice showing. The defense was a little spotty in that first game, but I think they stepped up and took care of business, winning the series. 2-1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, this team looks so different that I see names. I'm like, is that a Rutgers player or is that someone else in the other team? I don't even know. Like, I gotta give it more time to get settled with the team. But yeah, I mean, Nick, you obviously cover the team more than I do. But that first game, I remember you pointed out just that the team obviously looks very different. You could tell that the first game against Kennesaw State on Friday, well, the first of the 2 doubleheader games, you could tell that not that they were rusty, but it was like you could tell they were new to all this.
Yes, you can definitely tell that Rutgers had not faced live pitching in a game setting in a while. A lot of late swings, everything kind of going to the opposite field of the hitters. But that's something that comes with time and comes with playing more games. I think the one thing, if anything, you take away from this was it was a solid pitching performance from the staff, giving up just 3 runs.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
they won and 5 runs with. I want to see how many of those were earned runs because there was a couple of errors. Excuse me. So, all right, 1 second.
They gave up
so I guess
7 earned runs.
Yes, 7 earned runs. So it wasn't a terrible weekend. Definitely could have been a little bit better. Could have taken all 3, but I think fans and the players are happy with 2 out of 3.
Yeah, and I mean, when it's a brand new team, it's this team is again they're in a rebuild stage with Steve Owens' this team because it's very very different. So it's kind of like as a fans like where do you place your expectations on this team? Like what do you say? Because I think even last year with Rutgers, they weren't a top Big Ten team when they had someone like Josh Crowder when they were doing that good, and they only went. They went 6-18 in the conference. That was very disappointing last year. So this program's in a weird spot right now. I mean, it's just weird because considering in 2023 they were 33-23 overall, and they had a pretty solid year, 14-10 in the Big Ten. Then the year before that they were outstanding, 44-15 overall, 17-7 in the Big Ten. Didn't make the tournament that year, which again, by the way, that's another year that's very controversial. People were saying.
Yeah, best year in program history, and it doesn't get the team into the into the college tournament. Yeah,
but ever since that year, each year Rutgers has gotten a little bit worse and worse, you could say. And I think now we're at the spot where it's finally a brand new team, and we'll just see how they do this season. I mean, my expectations aren't really sky high. I'm thinking middle of the pack, Big Ten, probably a little lower. But yeah, you're right. You take 2 out of 3 against Kennesaw State, and you're right. In the last 2 games, both of them you won. You score 10 runs, only give up 3 runs. So the pitching was good and the hitting was good in those games. But yeah, I think a lot of guys in this lineup are still getting used to things. We saw a big there's a lot of big transfers like Payne Bonds. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about him. Barry Bonds related to him, and then. We'll see where this team goes. It's still really early, and I don't want to say any crazy expectations yet because it's a very brand new team, and I don't know. I hope I'm pleasantly surprised with the team.
Yep. Well, Rutgers baseball will travel out to the desert to face Grand Canyon in Phoenix, Arizona, starting on Friday. They'll play a 4-game set there before returning home for their home opener on February 25th against St. Joe's. But we'll keep it on the diamond. We'll go over to softball now. Rutgers softball with a pretty solid weekend, 4-1 at the Lion Invitational. Didn't really play all that much of competition, I will say. They played East Texas A&M, Abilene Christian, and SIUE. Now, Matty M, I will give you $1 if you can tell me what SIUE is without looking it up.
Do you have your wallet on you?
Why? Do you know what it is?
Ready?
What is it?
Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, something like that.
That is correct. Can you tell me what their mascot is?
Bobcats?
No, it's the Cougars.
I just guessed looking at the picture. No, I'm a fraud. I only know because I was editing the Targum article.
Yes.
That's how I know. I did not know off the top of my head. That was complete. If you asked me this 2 days ago,
you wouldn't have known.
No, I would not have known. I would have been like, I don't even know what I would have said. Probably Southern Illinois, Southern something. But yeah.
I'm pretty sure when I said it, I said Southern Southern Illinois University of Education.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, that's probably right. That's what I said in the moment. Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, you're right. It's a good weekend for the team. Of course, not really the best of opponents, but after starting season 1-4 at the last tournament, taking 4 of the 5 here is pretty solid, Nick. And now I think next weekend they actually got good competition. Like that's more to look forward to. Facing Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Bethune-Cookman, I don't know how to pronounce that, Oregon State, and UC Riverside. So a lot of competition there. It's pretty solid in California. I think this will be like the first real big test for the team.
Yeah, definitely. And it's another program where I feel like kind of have fallen below expectations in the past few years, but we shall see. I mean, Jill Anderson had a great weekend, or great start to the season, I should say.
Yeah.
407 on the young year. L.A. Matthews, obviously a name that you'll see all around the diamond.
Yeah, I like her last name.
Being a utility player, batted 387 on the weekend. But ultimately in softball, it's all going to come down to pitching. It's a little bit different than baseball because you don't have to really rest your softball pitchers. It's not like baseball where it's as taxing on the arm. So you'll see, Rutgers has 5 or 6 games next week. You'll probably see the same pitchers throw maybe 3 of those games.
Yeah.
Unlike where in baseball, you're not going to have a guy throw 2 times in the same series unless it's very much needed.
Yeah.
But yeah, softball with a lot of potential this season, I would say. Obviously, once you get into conference play, it gets a little bit harder. Rutgers wasn't great last year in conference play, but it wasn't bad. They were 33-22 overall, 14-9 in conference play. Not terrible by any means.
I mean, yeah, it was definitely one of their better seasons just as of late recently. I think though, losing in the first round of the Big Ten tournament to Wisconsin was the disappointing part. They could have went further, Nick.
No, 100%. And sometimes when you get into that tournament time, it comes down to who's hot at the right time. And, Wisconsin was the better team that day. And listen, the Big Ten, no matter what sport you're playing, is going to be tough. It's not an easy division, or conference rather, to play in. But, you came to Rutgers, you knew what you're getting yourself into. And I think softball is another one of those sports that's a little too early to tell.
Yeah, definitely.
But we'll move over now from baseball, get over into some lacrosse. We had Rutgers men's and women's lacrosse going on this past weekend. Women's lacrosse actually got to enjoy a little bit of a snow game on Saturday. Whereas the men's game, it was pouring, but it was pouring goals for Army.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Not a great performance. Rutgers men's lacrosse loses 9-3 at Army.
Yeah, that was oof. I want to know when the last time Rutgers scored 3 goals in a defeat was, or in a game was. It'll be too much to go back and look right now. Yeah, I mean last season I remember watching or covering the Army game at SGI last season when I covered the lacrosse team. They lost 16-7. That was another ugly game, but this one just feels worse. I mean, obviously, me and you, Nick, were here at the Targum office getting caucused in this weekend, so we didn't watch the game or, really.
Seems like almost thankfully that we didn't watch
yes.
the game.
It was bad because Army outscored Rutgers 6-1 in the first half, and I think from there it was just too late. Rutgers got shut out in this third quarter, got 2 back in the fourth, but it was just too late. And yeah, Army wins 9-3, and I know they're ranked number 12, but I know they're a really, really good team. They are probably one of the premier lacrosse teams. But yeah, I mean, Rutgers completely shut down. Only Dante Coulis, Blake Borges, and Concord look at the goal. So 2 of the 3 guys you would expect to score, but still only one goal. And if it wasn't for Cardin Stoller's 16 saves, Nick, I think this game could be even worse for Rutgers. I mean, he had a great game between the pipes, but I mean, Army just completely dominated the game start to finish. Outshot Rutgers 47-33. Rutgers had 20 turnovers. It was bad.
Yeah, and that's not the kind of game you want after losing to Stony Brook.
Yeah.
You obviously not a great situation losing them to begin with. Lost 9-8. But then you have to go and play the number 12 team in the nation in Army. And then you don't have easy games. I mean, Loyola, St. Joe's, not the worst games, but not super easy. But then after that, you have number 5 Princeton. And you're going to continue to see ranked teams. You're going to see what? 1, 2, 3 of the top 5 teams between now and the beginning of April. So you got a lot that you have to do, and a lot that you have to, a lot of games where you have to play well, and you don't want to have a good start to the season beating a ranked team, then beating up on a team you should beat, just to kind of fall flat and lose out the rest.
If you ask me, like, looking at the schedule, how Rutgers should have done, so, you have, before the Princeton game, let's say, if you have Lehigh, LIU, Stony Brook, Army, Loyola, and St. Joe's. In that stretch, Rutgers has to go 5-1.
100%.
5-1.
You cannot lose that game to Stony Brook.
Yeah.
Especially with a ranking next to your name. I think you and I talked about it a little bit when we were on the broadcast for LIU, but as a ranked team playing against an okay school, you have way more to lose than they do.
Yep.
If they go out and lose, that's what they're supposed to do. But if they win, you lose a lot of steam as a program. And that's what you saw against Rutgers or against Stony Brook. You had the loss, you lost the ranking, then you get steamrolled by Army, and now it's like, all right, well, let's see what the rest of the season holds.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I knew Army was going to be pretty much a loss for Rutgers. I mean, they're such a good team, but yeah, you have to go 5-1 in that stretch because these games are just so important. I mean, the Big Ten is so important as well. It's only 5 games, but these non-conference games are so important as well because lacrosse, it's a very, very short season if you think about it. You only play about maybe 14, 15 games total in the regular season, probably even less than that. And they're so important. And the fact that Rutgers is 2-2 right now and they should be 3-1 is a big question mark. And going into Loyola at home, I mean, it's still going to be a tough game. After losing to Stony Brook, I don't know how the team's going to respond. So, yeah, it's really, really important that these next 2 games at home, Rutgers wins against Loyola and St. Joe's. Because going to Princeton on the road, if they're coming off a loss or something, it's going to be even tougher. They need to be 4-2 heading into that Princeton game.
Yep, and we'll stay with lacrosse, move over to women's now. Tough start to the season, a 1-goal loss to Army.
Yeah.
But Rutgers women's lacrosse bounces back well. They beat Monmouth last Wednesday, and then last Saturday they come out with a 13-9 win in their home opener against Delaware. And you know what? For what they lost in the offseason and losing some of their top goal scorers, and of course not having Cassidy Spillis in the roster anymore, I feel like if you're a Rutgers women's lacrosse fan, you're not too upset with the way the season has played out so far. Yeah,
no, definitely not. I mean, I remember thinking to myself and saying to you, Nick, who's going to be, where are the goals going to come from this season? And so far we've seen Alexa Corbin, really solid. She had 5 goals against Monmouth, 1 on Saturday with 7 overall this season. Lily Dixon, she's a junior, so she's been around. I remember when I covered the team, my freshman year, she also was a freshman too, and I remember she was pretty solid her freshman year already. And then last year she was good, and now this year she has 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points. She had 6 points against Delaware on Saturday. So I think she's definitely up there for not Cassie's most replacement because you can't replace the program's best player, but someone that's gonna try to basically be the leader in points, goals, what have you. And then Victoria Goldrick's also been pretty solid as well. So they got some players. I think Rutgers women's lacrosse is definitely much more of a full committee chipping in. I mean, look at the scorers, Nick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players have 4 goals. One has 5, one has 7. So it's not really just one person dominating. We always saw Spillis dominate in the past. Now you got multiple players stepping up, and I mean, you would also think, logically thinking, it's better to have multiple players step up than just one, because if the one person has a bad game, who's going to step up? Now here you have multiple players. Like we saw against Monmouth, Alexa Corbin stepped up with 5 goals, and then we saw on Saturday, Lily Dixon had 3 goals, so she had a hat trick and a hat trick of assists. So different players stepping up here, and I mean, if you ask me, that's better than having just one leader on the team.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, especially when you don't have that true number 1 scorer like you did when Spillis was here, it's very nice to have a lot of different options, and that seems to be the case with this team this year. Matt, I know you want to touch on wrestling real quick, so I'll give you the floor. You can go through that, and then after that, we'll do a quick rundown of this basketball game, women's basketball coming up tonight. So, Matt, without further ado, the floor is yours for Rutgers Wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much to say. Looking at Friday night's matchup against Michigan State, I mean, Nick, honestly, I thought it was going to be a shutout win for Rutgers. Didn't happen, but still, they won 8 of their 10 bouts. They really, really dominant effort. You got Aiden Smith getting his first dual win at George Mike's Arena. I just completely forgot what he did on Friday first. Ryan Ford as well, another freshman getting his first dual win at George Mike's Arena. And then, of course, Connor Hare also getting a win. So 3 true freshmen in the lineup on Friday night, and they all got wins, which is nice to see. Last 2 bouts, John Poznanski loses to number 26, Remy Cotton, and then they throw out Johnny O'Donnell again. He loses a heavyweight. Not the biggest deal in the world. But, yeah, I talked to Scott Goodell after the game, or match. Basically, he just said it's a good win, but a little disappointed about how the match panned out at the end. I think he's more talking about John Poznanski. Poznanski has looked really, really poor this season. Believe he's 1-7, 1-8 against ranked opponents, which is really shocking. Ranked number 18 right now by Intermaz, probably going to go down significantly tomorrow. That's when they release the rankings. But yeah, he's had a really, really tough season. And I just remember, I think the real, the moment where things really went downhill for him was when, against Penn State, I remember Josh Barr, I think he's landed like 6 or 7 takedowns in the third period to beat Poznanski. And out of nowhere, it was like a 1-1 bout, 0-0 bout, and I think Barr ended up winning like 22-6 on tech fall, and that was just like, whoa. He completely took over Poz, and yeah, Poznanski's looked really rough this season at times, but we'll see, how it ends out. They wrestle UPenn on Wednesday, senior day matchup. Rutgers overall 13-15 and 5-3 in the Big Ten, so it's their first, winning season or winning record in the Big Ten since the 2018-2019 season. So overall, it's been a good season for the program. Now, when March coming very, very soon, a couple of weeks actually, we'll see what this team is really made of and how they can perform at Big Tens. But this UPenn match on Wednesday, it's pretty good. I'm actually looking forward to it. There's a lot of ranked matchups up and down the lineup for each team. So one more, good dual match before the real season really starts, if you ask me, and that's Big Tens and NCAAs in March.
Yeah, and it was a season of ups and downs. You beat some teams you might not have been forecasted to beat, and then other teams, you go up against Penn State, you kind of know what's going to happen. But
yeah.
A solid season so far for Rutgers, but like you said, Matt, it doesn't matter until you get into, you get into the Big Ten tournament, you get into the national tournament, and that's where you'll see, the best of the best.
Yeah.
But moving on now, final thing we got is women's basketball tonight. Rutgers women's basketball taking on Northwestern at home at Jersey Mike's Arena. And, we just talked about the best of the best, Matt. This is not the case. Rutgers and Northwestern, 2 of the bottom teams in the Big Ten Conference. And it's been a struggle for both of these squads. But this is a big game for both Rutgers and Northwestern as far as making it into the conference tournament goes. And that's because, as you know, this season with the addition of some new teams, it is now a 15-team tournament, so the bottom 3 teams will not make it. And Rutgers is sitting right around one of those bottom spots with a couple losses, 2-12 on the season, and Northwestern is 1-11 on the season. So very well could be that a team that wins this game is the team that ends up going to the conference tournament, because as it sits right now, Rutgers is in 4th with the tiebreaker over Purdue. And, if Northwestern beats Rutgers, all of a sudden you have a totally different matchup going on. But it seems like it's going to be a race between Rutgers, Purdue, and Northwestern for that final spot. And Northwestern can put themselves right in the mix with a win tonight.
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is you beat Purdue. Now, if you could beat Northwestern, you have the advantage over both those teams. So I think, that's huge for Rutgers with the standings-wise. You have, you go ahead on the head-to-head. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, both teams, do not look good. So if you're a women's basketball fan, don't watch this game. I'm going to be honest. Spend your Monday night watching something else, because you're going to see a lot of ugly basketball, you could say.
Well, listen, it's so interesting with this team, because there has been times where this team is hung with some decent teams, but then there's a lot of other times where Rutgers just seems like I don't even know how to say this nicely, but they're just outplayed so badly, it doesn't even look like they have any business being out there. They lost to Iowa 55-43 in what was probably one of the worst offensive games I have ever watched. 15 combined points scored in the 4th quarter of that game, which was a close game at the time. Rutgers only managed 21 points in the second half, and 22 points in the first half. And I think a name that you kind of have to turn to is Keomi McMiller. She was obviously the star coming into this season for this Rutgers team. She hasn't been out there in the past 2 games. Not sure what it looks like for tonight's game, but when you don't have one of your best players out there, it's really tough to compete, especially in a very top-heavy conference, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the elephant in the room. What's Keomi's status? Cole Quist has mentioned she was dealing with injury. We don't really know what the injury is, what the extent of it is. I remember you pointed out, Nick, that she was, with the team or on the floor, you could say, or not. How do I say it? I keep messing up. So, she was on the bench.
Yes,
against Purdue.
She was with the team against Purdue. I don't think she traveled with the team to Iowa.
I don't think so.
So it's interesting. And then Rutgers has not yet updated their availability reports for the Northwestern game tonight. At the time of this recording,
we'll find out very soon.
We will. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like Rutgers. I don't know. As somebody that's covered this team and as somebody that has followed this team all season, I don't think it looks great for her playing tonight, and that being Keomi. We don't know what the injury is, but all we got from Coquise is that she said she's not 100% and she'll be back on the floor when she is. But the problem now lies in the fact that there's not a lot of time left for her to be back at 100%. After tonight, you have Washington, Oregon, and Penn State. That's the 3 games you have left. So,
yep.
When is that going to come, if it comes at all? But
yeah,
again, it's tough when you don't have Destiny and Keomi out there together. Obviously, Destiny has struggled with foul trouble all year, which is a reason she has kind of had to take a seat at times. But, just not the season you thought you'd have with a player like Keomi McMiller handling the offense.
I think, we saw in non-conference just how electric she was. Granted, that's, of course, going up against worse programs, you could say. But, she to put it lightly, she was outstanding in non-conference. All over social media for her crazy shots, doing crazy things. And then once that USC game happened, it just all got really weird. She didn't play, to go on social media. Rutgers lose by 50. This team's terrible, worst loss ever. She's reposting it all, kind of like, yeah, see, if I was there, this wouldn't have happened.
Is that really the case, though? We've seen her play in conference games, and that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, so then she comes back to the lineup for, I believe, Nebraska, right? She played against Nebraska? Yeah, she did, because she missed the Minnesota game. She plays then, and then she goes through a solid string of games, and now, again, she's just disappeared from the lineup. So last time there wasn't a reason. This time Koki says there's an injury. So I don't know. It's fishy. It's a really weird situation, and I don't think we're gonna find out officially what happens. Maybe until the season ends, and we'll see what happens with Keomi.
Yeah, and it's not what you want to see from your best player. I wanted to get back to that whole Destiny Adams foul situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Destiny Adams averages 3.6 fouls per game. Okay. 3.6 personal fouls per game. She has 90 personal fouls on the season. Okay?
All right.
The next closest player is Tori McKinney of Minnesota with 81. So Destiny Adams has 9 more personal fouls, and I think it speaks to how aggressively she plays the game, which is usually a good thing, but sometimes you got to take a step back and say, hey, listen, my team needs me out here. I can't be going out and getting 2 fouls, 3 fouls in the first half and not being able to play until late in the second.
Yeah, and the problem is, she gets in foul trouble, right? She has to stay on the bench. Who's going to score besides her?
Who's going to score and rebound? She does it all.
Yeah, exactly. I think China Cornwell's been, if you look at rebounding, you look at her, but she's had a tough season this year. She's not really been the China Cornwell that we know and love. And especially in the Big Ten, she really struggled this year. So I think, last year Rutgers had China Cornwell and Cassandra Brown, both of them. I think that really worked out. And this year, you lose Cassandra Brown, you just have China Cornwell. And then besides Destiny Adams, there's really no other rebounder for this team. So Yeah, it's they're in a tough spot because if Adams doesn't play, they lose a main scorer and a rebounder, and then at least if Adams didn't play, we had Kierman on the floor who would probably get you at least 10 points a game depending on how she did. If she hit some crazy shots, if she doesn't, because she's very hot and cold. So this team is in a weird spot right now, and we'll see if they make the Big Ten tournament. I mean, if they do, I don't think they're gonna go maybe past the first game if they're lucky, but. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
We shall see. A lot of Rutgers sports going on now. A lot to keep going on in the future. Spring sports in full swing now as winter sports come to an end. But that is all the time we have for today. Matt, another great week of the Rutgers Rundown. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. You can find the podcast on YouTube at the Daily Targum YouTube and the Daily Targum's website. But signing off for now, Matt Mangam, Nick Hart saying thank you so much for tuning in and stay tuned next week for another episode of the Rutgers Rundown podcast.